feel free to kind of come and go as you need to. If you need the bathroom or get some water, definitely don't want heat exhaustion to be a thing today. I know it's a little sultry out. Pretty as heck, but it's sultry out. Postcard perfect. Just don't want to exist out 24/7 right now. So to start off with, hopefully everyone had a wonderful financial session previously before this one. If for some reason you didn't make it, times got squirrely, or just couldn't get to the place in time, please do see one of the Milliken staff over in the UC after this session, because in that last session they would have given you a personalized packet or had some information for you. So for whatever reason you didn't connect with the financial people, do that over in the UC for me. Hopefully everyone saw me this morning. My name is Chris Morrell. I'm the Dean of Student Wellness here at Milliken. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more in depth about some of the services we offer and some general strategies to kind of help your students transition over to Milliken. This is our pretty building. Another sunshiny day. We get plenty of those here in Illinois these days. So we share with the medical clinic. So on the right side of the building is medical clinic, left side is counseling center. Even if your student never plans to, wants to, gets to involved in any counseling individual sessions with us, hopefully they still have a relationship with myself and our counselors. Even if it's just crossing the path on the quad, saying hi, that can be a beneficial part of their experience. That can be something that uplifts your day. Again, the more network, the stronger network we can provide for your students, the happier we are, and it tends to be how the happier and healthier they are. So we definitely want to encourage that even if your students never think in a million years they want to use counseling services, we really want to broaden that conversation to just, are you taking care of yourself services, right? And that can be an individual journey, that can be a co-journey, that can be through conversation with my RA, with my support system back home, with my new support system here. We really want to push that narrative in that conversation. So the counseling side of things, we specifically don't call it the counseling office, although your students may refer to us as the counseling center, the wellness center, the clinic, student mental behavioral health. We try to utilize the term student mental behavioral health to again have that narrative be a little more holistic about it's not just purely like when you feel like the world is caving in. We are happy and more than willing to talk to you at that point, but we'd love to start that conversation earlier about, hey, what's the little things you can do throughout your day, week, and month, and year to make not only your academic semester successful, but also just you be happy and healthy, right? Be a whole person. So you might also hear referred to student mental behavioral health as SIMBA. It kind of looks like that if you put it in the vowels don't exist. Most students will call us that. So my staff consists of myself. I do carry a caseload. I work with students individually as well as in group. Our full-time counselor is Brittany, who recently just got back from a honeymoon cruise, so she's coming down, echoing these warmer weathers again. She was in Alaska, a little nicer there right now. Wow, indeed. Postcards I'd be okay with me. We are also hiring for another counselor by the August term start, so hopefully that will be up and running shortly. We're going through that interview process right now. And then we have 2 counseling interns. So these are not Milliken students. These are people that have been through institutions similar to ours. Typically we utilize the University of Illinois in Springfield, Eastern Illinois University, Lincoln Christian University is typically where interns come from. These are on full internships. They've done their academic coursework, they've done a practicum experience in a real world setting and done counseling, and now they're finishing up their program with us doing 2 semesters. Michelle was here with us last semester. She'll be finishing her internship with us this semester, and then Matt is just starting with us, so he'll be here for the full academic term. In addition to having the interns, we also have Isla this year, which is fantastic. She's a certified yoga instructor, very mindful, very knowledgeable in the mindful arena. She's going to really help us provide some entry-level conversations with students about, like, even if, again, you don't ever want to do actual counseling, you can still take care of yourself by trying out this mindfulness thing, or this meditation thing, or really focusing on are you taking care of all the different parts of yourself, right? It's great if you're getting straight A's and B's or whatever those grades we're hoping for are, or you're doing fantastic on the field. Are you also eating and sleeping enough? Are you having a social engagement that is fulfilling for you? There are still some seats filtered in if anyone wants to like wave their hands and get some knowledge about where the open seats might be. Got a few over there, a few over there. Last thing I wanted to say about interns, that is something we are very upfront about with students because some students frankly prefer to be with interns. I am an old white dude, disclosure, right? So there might be some different lived experience that interns can provide for students. Also, there's sometimes some more relatability that students prefer. Likewise, some students never want to work with an intern. That is totally fine. It is their choice. It is just one other way we are able to get around some barriers that sometimes prevent students from seeking other services before it becomes a crisis situation, before they feel like they need it, right? If they feel they need it, I want them engaging in services. But I'd love for them to engage in service before they feel they need it, just to have that strong base to build from. So, you got about a billion tidbits of information today. You'll remember very few of those probably. Hopefully, you'll remember where to contact us, and hopefully the same thing for your student, right? Part of the reason we do are a little redundant with this group in particular is because we know your students probably that's not the most thing they're focused on right now, right? They're more concerned with who their roommate's gonna be, where they're gonna be living, where the popular spots seem to be at, what their building looks like. Understandably, those are more important right now for them. They may not be thinking about when midterms come around getting super stressed, what will I be doing? You all have been very much crafting that narrative with them, I'm sure, as far as their resilience, their grit, their strength. We're definitely going to continue that conversation. Part of why we talk about it so openly and overtly with you guys is so you can do that fresh little reminder of like, wasn't there someone there that you could talk to that would be like free, that would be an office you can go to? Because we do individual counseling group psychotherapy. We will have at least one process group running this semester, as well as a lot of drop-in groups. Sometimes it's an easier lift for students to go, I am certainly never signing up for a counseling group, but I might go to this anxiety busters group that's once a month, right? They get to meet us, they find out we're not horrible people, that this could be beneficial for them, and that we can get them engaged in further services, right? Because sometimes it is just that sampling that behavior and going, oh, maybe this could fit for me. It's not something I've done before, but it's something I could see myself doing. There are currently no session limits. One thing COVID did to us, did a lot of things to us. One of the benefits, one of the positives, I don't know how to phrase that, folks. You know where I'm going with this. Telehealth was something we didn't do before COVID. It is something we've continued with. Because what we found was, unsurprisingly, that was a barrier to entry too. Some students were not presenting to our office because to do that takes a lot of steps, right? You gotta call us, you gotta show up, and then during the day of the session, you've also gotta do the same thing, show up and be vulnerable in a room. Some students have found that they are willing to engage in services if it's through Microsoft Teams, which is a HIPAA compliant system we utilize at Milliken's campus. And there have been students that previously not used our services that have been engaged in services. So I think that's another way we're trying to get around those barriers. There are certainly some presenting concerns we are not going to be okay with continuing purely telehealth model with, but again, if it gets in the pool of our awareness, we can do other things with them, right? Once we know about them, once we have some degree of relationship, we can put those other wraparound supports in place. There are currently no session limits. Certainly if we get to 6 or 8 or 10 sessions and the student doesn't feel they're making progress, we don't feel they're making progress, we're gonna be talking about that. But we're not gonna say, well, you had 5, so we've gotta go somewhere else. Group counseling we talked about. You know, the interns provide some different lived experiences, different personalities that students can choose from. But the reality is there's only going to be 4, 5, 6 possibly counseling type people in our office. There may be some lived experience or there might be some psychotherapy style that we just don't have expertise in. So in those cases, they can still use our office as a reference. We are more than happy to talk about kind of what's in the surrounding area, how we can connect with other resources that might better meet their needs. That does include Growing Strong Sexual Assault Center. We have a strong relationship with them, and then the Domestic Violence Shelter, as well as, again, other counselors and psychiatrists in the area. Of course, for psychiatrists and counselors, those would be, billed as outpatient mental health. We can't assist with that, but we can definitely assist with like, hey, they take this kind of insurance and have those conversations, because those can be awkward conversations, especially for our students to be having if they've never done that before. Insurance can be hard for adults to be talking about, or to try to manage. Dr. Bennett, someone I wanted to mention, he's a psychiatrist. He's not a Milliken faculty. He's actually employed through SIU Medicine. But through some of our relationships with some of the area providers, he has graciously allowed on Fridays from 12 to 4 his time to be through telehealth psychiatric appointments for Milliken students. That is still something that is billed through SIU Medicine, but we control the schedule. Some students have found that very valuable because we can typically get them in within the week. Typically, worst case scenario, usually 2 weeks. Which for area psychiatrists is pretty good because there's more supply than demand. We have about 3 or 4 psychiatrists in this area. Dr. Bennett's been a nice breath of fresh air to that to get someone else available to our students. So again, if those are conversations that a student wants to have for their med management or for assessments, even if I'm or our staff's not going to do the assessment or do the evaluation, we're happy to talk about who might be competent or capable or available to do so. So seeing us as kind of a resource center is going to be important. How can students connect with us? They can certainly email us. My preference would be they drop in or they call us because there's more immediacy there, and I want to get in the habit of like following emails back and forth between students, especially if they're talking about personal stuff. However, my Milliken, something they've heard about and you've heard about probably tons of times, they can schedule appointments with us online. Our interns will not be in that system, but myself and our other two counselors will be available on day one. They can go and see the availability, see what works with their schedule, so we don't have to go that back and forth. Again, that's for telehealth and both in-person appointments. So different contacts to know. Paul Lighty talked about this a little bit with campus life check-ins. There might be a time where, because of your anxiety, because of their anxiety, or because of chargers not being charged, or them just being so busy with life and awesome things, that the communication we'd like to have with them isn't happening. At those times, you're always welcome to reach out to my office or campus life and do essentially a soft check-in. Hey, I don't think we need to send the caliber in, but could someone just like ask their RA how they're doing, or could someone step in and just make sure that they're going to class at this time or meals at this time, right? We don't want to be a big brother and watch them 24/7, but if there's been a concern or a drop or a change in behavior, we want to follow up on that to make sure. We'd rather be a little over than under, right? And again, part of that relationship they're going to be doing anyway. The RAs are going to be checking with them and developing these awesome relationships with them. This is just our way of delving into the bit. So if that would help give you a little peace of mind, that's an option as well. In this very room, your students were encouraged to put public safety in their phones. Imagine some of the parents know that probably happened, and some parents probably know that probably didn't happen for some. I would encourage you to do it as well. It's a great way to get to anywhere on campus. You call public safety 24/7, 365. They can get you where you need to go. If it's my office, if it's campus life, if it's somewhere else. The on-call process through campus life in Simba. So there is always 365, 24/7 public safety staff in the building. There's always a campus life on-call staff member. Additionally, there's an on-call Simba counselor on-call. So the way the phone tree kind of works is public safety notifies, there's an issue, let's say there's two roommates having a disagreement at 3 in the morning, right? The RA, for whatever reason, can't resolve it, campus life would show up. If when they get there at 3 a.m., the concern is that one roommate's concerned about the safety or welfare of somebody, of their roommate, that's when they call us and we come in and do assess, right? So we're gonna make sure that that student's safe, taken care of, and do what needs to be done, whether that be moving to like a hospitalization or moving into maybe setting up continuing care with us or some other agency kind of after the fact, but we would be called in at that time. So there's always kind of that phone tree in the background. And students can do that for themselves, as well as students can do that for each other, right? So RA is certainly probably the most known for it, but you know, if your roommate is acting funny and you just want someone to check on them, we can do that as well for students. We're obviously not going to report back to another student how another student's doing, but if there's concerns, let us know so we can, again, get that wraparound care going. Raphael and Paul maybe talked about this page. I don't know if you have saw it from this morning. If you haven't, if you use Facebook, it is a good way to kind of stay up to date on what's going on campus. It's also a nice reminder there's a community already sitting there next to you right now. Like you are, some of you may have had students go off to college before, but right now everyone in this room is having someone they care about come to Milliken. This is a nice support system that could be, gleaned from this experience. I don't know how much you guys talk during lunch or during the in-between times, but I want to put that out there as a possibility. So mental health in your student transition to Milliken. Your students, we sometimes talk about that as like it's a static state. Obviously, it's been happening for quite some time. You have put 18 possibly plus years into effort and energy. So have they. They didn't get here by choice. They actively chose to come here. They've actually worked to get here. They have a skill set and support system that is effective for them. There can always be growth in that. No one's 100%, and we're going to help them grow and develop and build on that. As they sample those two behaviors, add to that. But sometimes what we see is New Year students kind of try to reinvent themselves by dropping everything, right? And sometimes that's because I'm, again, going back to maybe not remembering to reach back out to this support system from back home. Maybe that's I don't feel like I can anymore because I'm not physically there, right? But if there's important connections in their life, certainly the people in this room, but also past professors, past music instructors, past coaches that are beneficial that they consistently talk to or engage with, we want to make sure we continue to talk with the students about reaching back out to them, right? If they have this aunt or uncle they talk to once a month, they haven't talked to them in 2 months, if that change is intentional, I have nothing to say about it. But I want to make sure they're being intentional and aware of what's really filling them up or not. How have students been feeling so far? You've all been through a lot of groups, they've all been through a lot of groups. What's the attitude? What's the mood?
Sleepy.
Heat and lots of information. Totally understandable. Justifiable feeling. Anybody else? What is your student reporting to you? Well, you hopefully saw them between lunch at least.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, lots of stimulus, lots of things, lots of possibilities, which might be all wonderful, good things, but just by definition, lots of things can be stressful. Okay. Okay. So probably has a sense of kind of.
Yeah, this will be his last year.
Okay.
He's very excited.
So hopefully she's like the capstone. I'm kind of coming in with some knowledge base. Okay. Any other thoughts, feelings? Again, I think wonderful optimism and extreme anxiety are very common for this day specifically. Questions that are arising? Are they engaging with other students? Are they engaging with purely you?
Oh, it made friends. See?
Okay.
Already. And don't take long.
Doesn't sound like it was terribly unexpected either though. Okay. Any other thoughts you want to air to the group? Again, that's one of the niceties of this group is that we are able to share this common experience, that they are all getting hit with a ton of information at one time. Going back to the idea of like around starting square one, you very much have a sense, they probably have some passive sense of like, when I'm doing really well, these things are happening in my life. When I'm not doing so hot, these things are happening in my life. We all have that potential to be aware of that. We're not always aware of that though, because life is very busy, plenty of stimulus, right? It's very easy to go react. That might be all good stuff. I'm accomplishing wonderful things, right? What we don't want to have is your student at the end of the semester be like, I accomplished all these things, but I feel burnt out, right? I wanted to get A's or B's or whatever the grade we're looking for is to get them to move forward in life, but we also want them to feel healthy and happy, right? And sometimes students get so fixed on completionist, completing that checkbox, I go do this, that they kind of drain themselves without realizing it. Or again, they stop doing things that we know fill them up. If your student plays basketball a couple times a week to de-stress and gets here and just so busy they forget to do that, again, if they intentionally chose that and replaced it with another stress reliever, fantastic. But if it's just they got away from it, put it on the back burner, I'll get to when I'm not busy, they will never not be busy. We are never not busy unless we intentionally make ourselves not busy, right? Basketball is kind of an easy example. We have the disc, we have obviously the basketball team, we even have pickup games like in the park. Like, is there a way that we can tap into something we know helps you without reinventing the wheel? We want to add positive coping skills as well and new and wonderful things, but if there's already things they know work, how do we connect those into a milligan sense, right? And I think sometimes that can be a useful conversation, like maybe on the way home, of like, are they aware of what helps them? You as parents and guardians and caregivers likely have a good sense of when you're doing well, you're doing these things, we're not doing top, you're doing these things, people, places, and things. Are they aware of it? And them not being aware of it isn't anything against them, just if we're going okay and things are going all right, we don't always have that reflection piece. And this is a beautiful time in their lives to really refine that reflection piece and figure out kind of what moves them and where it's moving them to, and if that's the direction they want to go. Obviously not a perfect thing, but it'll come with some trials and errors, but we want them having that conversation, not only with their peers and with us, but with themselves. Has there been any discussion amongst you and your students about when we will do check-ins? Like, I don't want to say it, but like mental health check-ins, right? I don't say it that way because sometimes students like, your back gets up, right? But how will I know you're taking care of yourself a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now? Because you probably have a good idea of what that looks like, at least on paper, right? If they're doing well, they're not behind all their classes, they'll probably be behind in maybe one. They're talking, they're eating 2 meals a day at least, and they're going to bed by at least 1:30 in the morning. Not ideal for most of us, but if that's what, I know my student can be successful in that sense. Have there been any discussions within your students or any ways that you're planning to have that kind of either reminder conversation for them or check-in status with you? Not yet. And again, this can be a nice time to kind of consider and come up with some strategy for that. And I think it's very much an overt, for me, it's very much an overt, like asking them in 2 weeks, what would they like to see themselves be doing, right, once they get here? In 2 weeks, what would you like to have done? Essentially goal setting, right? Treatment planning comes from our world. Because if they're not there in 2 weeks, but they're happy and successful, fantastic. If they're not there in 2 weeks and they're not happy and fantastic, are there things that we've let fall into that back burner that we can put in place to help them move forward, right? It's all about that awareness building with your students. They're not going to probably sit down and make their own goals for the next couple of weeks. They'll have ideas of where they want to be, but the little steps of how to get there might get lost in the weeds because, again, just like today, there's going to be tons of days like today where there's so much stimulus hitting them all at once, not a lot of time for that reflection piece. Common struggles we see, a couple of them, make sure we're on time, yeah. Rafaela mentioned it, even if they're good emails, if they get 30 emails a day and they don't check it for a week, that's a lot of emails, and your email's gonna go boom to boom real quick, right? When you log in, don't know about you, but my email goes boom to boom, don't know why it makes that sound, gotta get it checked. It's stressful though, right? When I get that many emails, I don't care if they're from Disney World or Mickey Mouse himself, that's gonna be stressful. Sometimes students find it easier to, again, attend to all the reactive stimulus stuff and just kind of close that laptop and I'll get to it when I have time. Best of intentions, but that time will never magically appear. Their professors will keep them busy, their peers will keep them busy, they will keep themselves busy. And hopefully positive, empowering ways, but busy nonetheless. That laptop may not get opened again. Can be an easy conversation to have with students about how they're feeling with that. That is not something we are opposed to doing with them. Once I know about it, if a student or if I find out a student hasn't opened their email in a week or two, A, that probably is a sign of other things going amiss. But B, that's something we are happy to sit with and do. I know the CAP does it a ton. Where are we at with the emails? Have you checked it this week? If the answer is no, and it's only been a couple days, great, let's do it together, right? That doesn't mean we have to do emails for them, but just again, getting them in that practice of not letting it become this mountain they feel they have to lift on their own. Not getting books, Rafaela talked about that, so I won't harp on that one. If there's hardship or if there's some reason they're not able to get the books, they're having some issues with getting the books, please do start a conversation with ourselves, with the CAP office, because that is one way students often find themselves behind come, halfway to midterms, is they thought they could catch up like they did in high school. Some of your students may have had courses where they didn't have to apply their full self, or they didn't have to have the book. That's the reality of it. And there will be professors here that probably emphasize it more or less. The problem is you won't realize that until you're too far in. And there will definitely be students that are willing to help them out and professors are willing to help them out, but we really want them to not have to feel like they're having to dig themselves out of a hole. And that can be a pretty objective one to find out about because you either have the book or don't, right? Comparison traps, Millikan students are wonderful and exceptional. The downside of that is Millikan students are wonderful and exceptional, so when I'm not having a good day, it's really easy for me to go, they got their stuff together, they're making friends, they're getting good grades, and really easy to I'm the other, I'm the exception to the rule. I think I'm biased. Honest conversations usually disabuse ourselves of that idea. One of the first things that happens in a group counseling session oftentimes is one brave soul says, I don't feel good enough, and then a bunch of other people go I have ways of thinking that way. And then we can start to empathize with each other. We have some shared experience. We can build on that and do some good things. But if we never say that, we don't get to that second piece. And most of us don't go through life talking about our vulnerabilities, even if we go through that already kind of living them for ourselves. So a lot of our staff will do basic check-ins. That's why we have even if they never work in my office, it'd be great for us to know each other. So we can ask them how they're doing. Give them multiple chances in the day to go, hey, I have a thought that maybe isn't so helpful, even if I can't identify that as such, so that we can get some oxygen, some sunlight, and we can rephrase that in a more positive, empowering way. Because none of your students will do it perfectly. None of your students will do it horribly. It's a trial and error for everyone. It just feels different depending on how we're talking about it to ourselves and how we're talking about it with each other. Relationships, some go 0%, some go 100%. I don't want them solely focused on that. I don't want them excluding themselves from those conversations, right? I put silos up there because athletes, SOTAD students, musical students are sometimes pretty guilty of this. Again, well-intentioned. I'll pick on athletes though. Athletes have to develop this strong kind of group bond, right? They have to practice a ton, which means they're together a ton, which means understandably there's going to be some strong relationships in there, right? The problem then though is if there's drama then that starts in there, they don't have anyone else to go. And they can feel very lonely or ostracized, even if there's a good support system in that group. So we definitely encourage students to diversify those experiences a bit, right? Join a club that's not, if you're on the football team, that's on the football team. Find a reason to be somewhere other than just a new hall too, or on that field, right? Through the residence hall is a great example, like talking to your resident assistant, any of the paraprofessionals. But again, just hang out on the third floor. Lots of students just hang out on the third floor to be social. Not exclusively, but if you find yourself with time to do, choosing to sit in your room or hang out on the third floor or hang out in Starbucks, those latter two options tend to be better because it provides the opportunity for people to engage with you, right? Most people don't go through, thankfully, barging into your room to talk to you if you haven't invited them. Starbucks, that'll happen. Hey, I know you from this class. So again, trying to make sure they're not only having focused, healthy focus on relationships, but making sure they're trying to get into different groups too. Beneficial. Not reaching out until late in the semester. Certainly the best time to learn how to swim is not when you're in the middle of the ocean. I definitely meet a student for the first time occasionally at midterms or finals. In a perfect world, that would never happen. Even if I'm not working with the student, I'd love to get to know them, know what their strengths are. So then if they're off base from their strengths and what really works for them, we have an easier path to get back on. We can do it either way, but we want to make sure they don't, again, feel like they are in crisis mode. We love to get to them before then. One thing parents can do or guardians, caregivers can do, if you talk to your student and they say, I'm exclusively going to my room, going to class, going to my room, going to class. A couple possibilities, right? Let's be honest, it could be being dramatic. They could be very focused right now about getting a project done. They could just be in the zone to get something completed, or maybe they're there helping out someone. There's lots of different reasons. But if you're hearing that, if the possibility is there they're not engaging anything besides their room and class, or just their room, that would be a time to be getting either paraprofessionals involved, my office involved, campus life involved. Again, it doesn't have to be something knock on the door and be like, what's wrong with you? That could be something as simple as a parapro go and check in with them, hey, how's things going, right? Have you gotten to the cafeteria today? Have you been to this class lately? Have you been practicing for this sport recently, you know? Starting those conversations, which then, if there is something kind of going on in this, we can get better information about, but just having that ability to have that conversation again. I never want to find out that a student's been in the room kind of suffering in silence. So one way we can figure that out is if they're not answering the calls, again, we can use those soft check-ins to get that engagement back up. We definitely want to normalize trial and error with your students. Some of them will leave with like 30 different names of people that are now their best friends. There's going to be a ranking order when they'll drive home. Some of them will feel like it seemed like a lot of people were connecting and I wasn't as much. There's going to be ups and downs to that, certainly. Normalize the idea that you're really going to be finding your way for a while. It's not going to click in the first week or the first 2 weeks. You might find your best friend on the first day, and you might be best friends with them until you're 99 years old. But sometimes it happens where your best friend you meet on the first day is not your best friend a week from now. And that's okay. And we want to normalize the idea that give yourself the option to move. If it's no longer working for you and no longer healthy for you, we don't want you to feel obligated because it started out as something good. Or started out as something that felt different. Study habits will be one of the things that they'll also sample, right? Some of your students can study upside down, feet against the wall, music blaring, on the quad. Some of them will study in their room, not do so hot. Study in Starbucks, not do so hot. Find out they lock themselves in the library, they do pretty good. And again, I think normalizing those conversations, but having this conversation not only with them, but encouraging them to have a conversation with themselves. Like, do a self-assessment there, you know? Are you getting the grades you want to get in the first 2 weeks? 1 week's kind of early. First 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right? If you feel like you're doing good, fantastic, we'll support you that. Don't feel good, fantastic. Let's find out what we can change and move around there. As adults, we know that as students, they sometimes feel locked in, this is how I've always done it, so this is always how it has to be. In high school, they probably found effective patterns. Those may work in college. May need some tweaking. But again, being as proactive as you can is always helpful. And I'd rather talk to them before midterms than after. More than happy to talk after. With our wellness coach, we definitely try to start the conversation not just about mental health, because that can be fairly stigmatized. Successive generations need to be better about it. Your generation's better than my generation was, so on and so forth for students. However, we still do sometimes talk about it as when it becomes an issue, right? As opposed to mental health should be how we carry ourselves throughout the day. Are we taking care of ourselves or are we kind of neglecting ourselves? We are doing that either day whether we're talking about it or not. And so encouraging the students to think about, where's your mindset at, right? Would you say the same things you're saying to yourself to your best friend? If not, possibilities, room to move there. Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Your students are young and resilient. They can get away with 2 hours of sleep probably for a couple days and probably not have that objectively affect their grades at first. We certainly want to push the narrative of the conversation that that's not terribly sustainable. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And that's, again, another adult life choice, right? You are capable of doing that, but that's probably going to burn out some other areas of your life, right? You may not be as attending in relationships as you want to be because you're tired, even if you're not falling asleep, standing up, like you were at my age. But, encouraging them to really see where the disruptions are coming from, right? Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Nutrition, again, that's one of the things Flex is good for. If you have plan A, it's $100. If you have plan B, I think it's $300. If they burn that through in a month and they say it's from coffee, we can do the math okay. If they're only eating Domino's, again, they can probably do it. Their system will allow that for a while, more than maybe some of our older systems will. But again, not terribly sustainable, right? And is that feeding their mind in the best possible ways? It's not a judgment thing. I'm not going to harp on anyone for eating Domino's as much or more than I do. But I do want to have that conversation about, is that feeding you kind of long term, right? We're trying to find a strategy this first semester to kind of guide you through the rest of the year. Exercise, same deal. If they're an athletic person before they get to Millikan, they should continue being an athletic person, especially the first couple months, because snow doesn't even hit. I'm not going to look somewhere. October, November, right? December, January, whatever. So if your student is a runner, a biker, you can't do surfers, but if they're athletic, and again, if they're intentionally choosing not to be athletic because of some other awesome, wonderful thing, that's different. If they're not choosing to be athletic because they're just too busy, how do we start prioritizing that a little bit differently, right? Maybe that is not being involved in all of the groups. We want to be involved in groups. We have 85, 90 groups. We don't want you to be involved in all the groups. We want you to go to some of the plays. We don't want you to go to all the plays because there's going to be too many of them, especially as the semester really gets up and running. So again, making sure they're taking care of themselves how they know they can take care of themselves. We've been doing it for 18 years. Coping skills, obviously my office is good for talking about that. If they feel they're struggling with anxiety or depression or negative self-talk. We also want to talk about what's, for them, what's going to fill them up. What do they enjoy doing? What do they have fun doing? One of the awesome things about a small campus is there's something that you love. 2 sessions ago, pickleball came up. We don't have a pickleball team, as far as I know. If that is something your student is interested in, talk to their RA, get 2 more people, and that can become a club, within the week. Maybe 2, I don't know how long. But they can get some monies for it, they can buy some supplies, they can have an engaging thing. There are some rumors that a Dungeons and Dragons club is going to start. Fantastic. If that is something you enjoy, that moves you out of the room and gets you to engage with others, I love it, I support it. But that can be one of the nice things about in that small school environment, that if there's a need there, let's find a way to, they still find a way to scratch it. If your student always draws before they get here, and they kind of put that in the back burner. Even if you're not an art major or a design major, you can probably find some ways to either make a club, craft a club around that, help a professor with that in some way, use that art skill, use that drawing skill as a coping skill to keep moving you forward. Social, some of your students will be bouncing off the walls when you go home, some will be sleeping from all the engagement and the heat. It's important for them to be aware of how big a social battery they have. Some of them probably have some sense of it, and some are probably not because they haven't hit the low or the high yet. In college, you have plenty of opportunities to be social or not be social. We really want them to be engaged and be active. We don't want them to burn out, right? They do not have to be everything to everyone, but we really want them to feel like they're in control of that. And then what kind of connections they need. At a minimum, I would love in the first week if you ask them how your RA is. Do you love your RA? Do you hate your RA? What's your RA's favorite sport, color? Tell me something about it. Because they're keeping an eye on you. I'd say that. How do we start spurring on some of these connections? I think RA is a fantastic one because they're really living there. And if that connection's good, it can be a really nice outlet to the other wraparound supports that can get engaged when needed to be. I think I skipped. Yeah, I did. I had a similar conversation with students in the first week about your life's going to be really busy, and that's cool, that's fantastic. Don't let it get too busy for your own happiness and health, right? So I think that we can plan that your professors are going to assign you stuff, your friends are going to want you to do stuff, and you're going to want to engage in stuff, right? activities, sports, things like that. There is not going to be an outside source, potentially, maybe barring people in this room, hopefully. There might not be an outside source that tells you to slow down, take a step back, where are you kind of at, right? Physically, mentally, spiritually, all that kind of good stuff. Sometimes it can be helpful for students to like write on the mirror, write themselves a post-it note. I'm a big fan of like putting Outlook appointments in my calendar for like months away, so it just pops up and like, oh, a friendly reminder to like think about that, take care of myself. Going back to drawing the basketball idea, have I done that in the last week? And if I haven't, that gives me a space and opportunity to even do something about it, right? If our students are intentional and aware, I know they're going to make good choices. We start making bad choices, poor choices, where we start to not feel in control, or we're just being so reactive to all the stuff coming in the pipeline. So, I don't say it has to be in a certain way, but if they can find some way to have those helpful reminders, I think goes a long way. It goes on our Outlook calendars too. Plans for engagement support system. Do we know how often your students are going to call you? Has anyone worked out a kind of perfect system for you? Either because you've sent a college student away before, or like, these are kind of what I look forward to seeing. I expect a call every 3 days. I expect a video chat every weekend. Anybody have any plans in place so far? Has that conversation arose yet? Outside of your own mind? Guess I'm sure it's in there. Any ideas of what might be realistic for your families? What could work?
Well, my son, he playing football, so he can come down to the game.
So you know at a minimum, after games I'll get kind of a report. Is that what I'm hearing? So like after games you'll get a report?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yet again, that might be a nice baseline. If for some reason you don't, no reason to send the cavalry just for that, but it might be a sign of like, hey, I'm going to definitely check in that next day though, because I know my kids. They're going to tell me how they did in that game. And obviously that goes for like musical performances.
Did we talk to our other child once a week on the weekend?
Yes. Who's that already college students?
Already college
They
students.
are a sense of our, that might be college, but we haven't had this much discussion.
Is the student coming here involved with the call with the other students?
Maybe, but they do know that's the, oh, yeah, the college student checks in with parents. Yeah, video call.
Yeah, we cannot plan our lives out, we just can't, but it is nice if we can set up a certain time in the day when it usually happens. But again, each family will be a little bit different, but it's important to know, like, I know what's normal for my student, I know what's realistic too. I want to know about the game too, obviously. I do some fair amount of trashing social media, kind of in my day-to-day world, because a lot of not good stuff can come up with it, right? If you're spending 24 hours on social media, some bad stuff can happen. There's a lot of good stuff on there too, though. These are a couple examples of apps that do like mindfulness stuff, meditation stuff, or provide that nice reminder to take care of yourself that sometimes we forget about. You know, I mentioned we have an on-call phone through our office and through Campus Life. On our office's phone, we actually have the Travelers to Headspace, just because every now and then it sends like a daily affirmation or a reminder, a breathing thing, right? It's not necessarily something most of us that carry that phone have to learn, but it's not really something we prioritize because, like everyone, we get busy, right? So I think these can be things we put in place with your student before the semester starts, before it gets busy, that will remind them for us without us having to be mindful of it. Couple of quick takeaways. If your student takes nothing away from today, other than our services are free and we're wonderful, if they have a question or need something during their time working, they can always walk to the 3rd floor on the UC, that cool building we've been in today. They can walk into literally any office besides the restroom and get help. The person that will be behind the door, it'll be the CAP office, it'll be Campus Life, can direct them where they need to go. If they need to come see my office, they'll walk them over. If they need to go to the writing center, let them know where it's at. If they need some financial hardship, or figure out a relationship issue, or figure out a roommate mediation, that's a starting point for all of that. With the exception of my office, literally all that support is on the 3rd floor, which is really fantastic because hopefully they're going to cafeteria anyway. They can just take the elevator up or the stairs. Always do the stairs, but it's there. The parent Facebook page I think is important. If you have some time to share amongst yourselves, either after this group or while we're waiting for your students to come back in, I think that can be a wonderful opportunity. It's a nice support here. You're always more than welcome to reach out to my office as well. I'm going to stay back here after I dismiss you, because we're in school, so I'll say dismiss. If you want to talk to me personally about your student, I'm more than happy to hear, or if there's something you'd like me to reach, if you'd like our office to reach out the first week, we can do that as well. Just let me know who they are, how you'd like me to reach out. If you have questions, let me know. The next part of the show is going to be in the UC. We're going to meet your students over there, so when they get out of group, we can kind of warmly welcome them to the Milliken family. They will blush a little bit. We will learn the alma mater and the fight song, and then we'll go on our way. So appreciate y'all. Does anyone know how to get to the UC?